Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 2 of the Son of a podcast, hosted by me, Gabe, and I am my co-host, Albert.
Daddy.
Yeah. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about religion. It was briefly mentioned in last week's episode, but I want to preface and I want to state that we're not going to be talking about whether religion is good or bad, if you should believe in God or if you shouldn't. We're just going to talk about our own experiences with it, specifically with my dad's experience it when he was younger. We'll get into that later on. But we just want to get that out of the way. And yeah, let's get on with it.
Let's get on with it. Shoot away, my man.
Shoot away.
You got questions or you got things to say?
No, I have questions for you, which I know you'll ask me back questions. The first question I want to ask was, how was it growing up in a very religious family? Because you had a very religious family, right? Or your family is very religious.
Extremely religious, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say we are ultra religious.
Ultra religious.
Ultra religious. It's not going to be, I wouldn't say extremist because we're Catholics. Catholics are nonviolent. But yes, I grew up in a super religious environment. I was born into that. And that's the key thing with religions, I think, is that the fact that you were normally born into your religion and you don't really get a choice. So that's my first thing about religion. Second, yes, I grew up, my parents are devout Catholics. Their families were all devout Catholics.
Yeah.
And that's how I grew up. And when I say ultra and extreme, I don't really mean in any bad way. I just meant that all your life revolves around your religion. Everything you do and every action you take and everything you say is with that religion in mind.
Right.
When I say extreme and when I say ultra, that's really what I mean. I don't mean in action or in violence or in right. There is a small element of when you are so devoted to your cause. Obviously, it's your cause, which means that anybody else's cause that differs to yours is the wrong cause, right? So there's a little bit of that edge there, but it's not I didn't grow up in an extreme environment where my parents said if they're not Catholics, they suck. You know, do not talk to anybody that isn't a Catholic. It wasn't that, but it was quite extreme. And growing up there, what do you want to know?
Well, just kind of what your experiences were and what you did, obviously, because just a disclaimer, obviously I didn't grow up in that situation. You didn't raise me in a Catholic or in any religious way at all, to be honest. We didn't go to church every Sundays. You never told me to pray. You never really told me about God at all. So I'm just very interested in what it's like to grow up in a scenario that's very religious.
Yeah, so perfect. First of all, spoiler alert, the fact that you just said that you didn't grow up in that environment means that I stepped away from it.
Yeah.
Okay. There came a point where I was very disenchanted with my religion. And okay, but back to the beginning. So growing up, it was pretty much what I said. All my life as a child revolved around being a Catholic. And specifically, especially in the early to late 70s, that at that time Catholicism was viewed as, well, you basically had one purpose and one purpose only, to be in this world. There was the global purpose, which is help others, which is a great purpose to have. The second purpose is a little bit more personal, a little bit more selfish, so to speak, and that is to prevent your going to hell at all costs.
Right.
Right. And that's what my purpose in life was as I was growing up. At that time, Catholics were quite fierce.
Okay.
And they used fear. That's why I say fierce, because they used fear as a means to make sure that you were always scared of going to hell.
Right, okay.
Okay. And I remember distinctly from the moment I was 0 years of age to the very first memories I have, I lived in constant fear of doing something wrong that would send me to hell. And eventually it's a little bit like a handicap. You end up, or a disability, you end up learning how to cope with it, right? And very often you learn to cope with the fact that no matter how hard you try, you probably will go to hell because we're just never good enough, right?
Right. Okay.
And that eventually got to be a huge burden on me. I don't know if all other children or all other Catholics feel like that, but that's how I ended up feeling. That was when I was smaller, right? Up to when I was like maybe 10 years old or so. And that's what I remember of being a Catholic. I can't remember very often having a good feeling, saying like going to bed one day and thinking, I've done good today. You know, if I
Yeah.
die tonight, I'll wake up next to God. It was always like, man, you know, what did I think today that might take me to hell? What if, you know, and I really literally did think that. What if I
Yeah.
don't wake up tomorrow? You know, and of course I had the image of hell that they burn into you as a Catholic, which is, you know, burning, literally
Yeah,
burning, you
suffering
know,
and
suffering,
pain.
eternal pain, flames, you know, over and over again and here's the important bit, for the rest of eternity,
Yeah.
right? And that used to scare the crap out of me, you know, and that happened, that was all the way from till I was like maybe 10, 12 years old. Then it calmed down a little bit. That's on the one side. Then the good side of being a Catholic is that the Catholic cause is very noble. Okay, I do have to say that. It sounds like I hate Catholicism, and I do not hate Catholicism. In fact, I don't hate religion at all. And the good side of the Catholics is that the Catholic cause, the reason they are Catholics, is only good. Is to help people out. It's for the cleansing of the soul and to go to heaven. And the thought of heaven as a beautiful place where everybody has to live in harmony and well, you don't actually live, you just be. You are, right? The spirit, God, angels, all that. All that, if you look at it from that side, from that perspective, is beautiful. It's very good. And it actually gives you a reason to live. So I can see why religion and why Catholicism is so appealing to people. And I think that's changed throughout the years. I haven't practiced for a long time, but I believe Catholicism now is not about the punishment of being bad, but the rewards of being good.
Being good.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe if I'd have been born a few years later, maybe I wouldn't have come to this conclusion. But the truth is that living as a child, I lived in constant fear. Right. And even as a teenager, I remember when we came down to the coast of Torremolinos, my life changed drastically, and the people that I surrounded myself with were not Catholics.
Yeah.
In other words, just by default, they were sinners and going to hell. Poor guys, right? And that to me was a huge burden as well, thinking that I was talking to people that were already doomed to go to hell, just for the very reason that they did not believe in the same things as I believed in. I found it really hard to come to terms with that. But at the same time, I realized that there was another world out there that was not the world I had grown up in. I grew up in a very insular Catholic world, and suddenly I wasn't there anymore. And I could see that my parents were very conflicted as well. They could see that they were suddenly having to fight those forces within us, within their children. So they used to sit and indoctrinate us and say, like, listen, those people, and the only missing word was those poor people, right? They are doomed, but bless them, they're also human beings. You have to pray for them, right? It was quite sad, and this eventually created a huge conflict within me. And if you ask in a nutshell, what was it like growing up in a super Catholic family? I would have to answer conflict and turmoil. Internal conflict and internal turmoil.
Wow, really?
Yeah. So now I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Right. So now, needless to say, I outgrew that. I decided to not pursue the Catholic religion anymore.
Yeah.
I've never, as a parent, me or mom have never even really spoken to you about religion. I've given you facts of my upbringing, a little bit of what you just heard, but not much. But we've never told you what to do with your beliefs. It just never came up, really. It's never been a thing. So now I ask you, what was it like for you growing up in a world that's full of religion and not having been told anything about it? Were we right or were we wrong, first of all?
Well, I don't know if you were right or wrong. I mean, right now I would say you were more leaning more towards the right, because I have no internal struggles or internal turmoil or anything like that. But I also feel like we're in a position, or I grew up in a position of privilege. where religion wasn't something that I needed to hold on to for hope,
Right.
or to believe that in the future things will get better.
That's a great point, because that's really what religion does. It gives you hope.
Yeah, exactly. So we never needed that when I was growing up, which is I'm very thankful for to you guys. So I never felt like I was missing something. I never felt like I was like, right now, if I believed in God, I would be whole. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So growing up, it was quite normal for me not to believe in God, and it's a bit strange in a way as well, because we live in a very religious country.
Yeah.
Spain is quite a religious country. We have, especially in Malaga, where we live, we have how would you say the tronos?
The Easter parades, yeah,
parades.
with the thrones, with the
With the
not
thrones.
thrones, with the big platforms that you carry on.
Yeah,
Right.
which I participate in
Yeah,
now.
which is ironical, isn't it?
It's very ironic that I don't believe in God yet. I still do it, but I do it more for the cultural thing and the fact that I grew up watching them. So it's not. I don't do it for the religious side.
for the religious side.
I do it more for the fun, if you
Okay.
can call it fun. But yeah, I never felt anything like anything was missing, if you know what I mean.
Right. And do you think, because this is really interesting to me, because the idea of God and spirituality and the soul have really literally been injected into me since I was a little
course.
kid. So you, as a person that grew up without that, and me being your father, I'm really curious to think. You just mentioned in passing, without even thinking, you say, "I don't believe in God."
Yeah.
So you don't believe in God? at all.
No, I don't.
Right.
I don't.
Okay.
I'm an atheist.
Right.
I don't think that there's any higher power.
Right. And because just by the fact that you're saying that, it means that you've actually had to think. You sat down to think.
Yeah,
about
of course, I've thought about it. Obviously, when I was growing up, not when I was 8, 9, because I wasn't really old enough to think about that stuff. But couple years, 3, 4 years ago, I did sit down and I was like, do I believe in that? And I never thought, like, I never had the feeling that there was, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it has to be a feeling that there is, which I don't have. I don't believe that there is.
Yeah, that's so funny because I even now I get that feeling that there is. I don't know what it is. I'm not sure if it's God or whatever it is. And so often, even now at 53, I wonder whether that feeling I have, it's just sort of like a hangover of the Catholic injection I have in me, or whether I am so spiritually gifted that I can actually feel that thing. You know, I mean, I like to feel the second.
Yeah, honestly.
But I do get a feeling that it's not. I get a feeling that it's the first thing. I think it's just a hangover of the fear that was put into me, and the fact that that I was told over and over again that my life didn't depend on me; it depended on a higher power, and that higher power is everything I feel is thanks to that higher power, and that's really hard to shake off. So I do get that feeling. I do get a feeling of, when I feel feelings like love, rage, extreme feelings, it's hard for me to believe that those feelings, even now, are pure chemical reactions in my body, and that's it. There's nothing, because I feel it so strongly. When I play my guitar and I feel those notes flowing through me, I find it really hard to think this is just pure chemistry going on.
Yeah.
Because I feel it, and I feel alive, and I feel those notes flow, and it's hard to not equate that to religion in some way, from my point of view.
I find that very funny because for me, I only feel it as I only see it as a chemical reaction.
Right.
I don't imagine it being a higher power that's allowing me to feel those emotions or created those emotions in me.
That's amazing.
That's never crossed my mind. For me, it's always been science. And also because obviously I like science a lot and I pursue it quite a bit in my own way. I never imagined it. I could never see it as just it being because of God or because of a higher power.
So All right, so 2 more questions I have for you. One is, you mentioned that you actually participated in these processions, which obviously I know because I helped you. I helped you,
Yeah.
and I drove you to them.
And you were watching me doing
those
it.
6 hours walking with a 15 kilo or 25 kilo piece of wood on your. Anyway, part of the reasons why the people that are with you in the thrones do that is penitence. It's a way to suffer for their sins, right? So carrying a 10-ton image of Christ on their shoulder for 6, 7, 8, 9, even 10 hours is a way of them showing to God that they're suffering and they're willing to suffer for His sins, right?
Correct.
For your sins, and in theory, after that night, your sins are erased and you start from scratch. A lot of other people do it for their spirituality, because they can feel God through them when they're carrying that throne and singing those songs and saying those prayers. Have you, in the 3 years, 3 years, no, or 2 years?
2 years.
You've done it twice.
I've done it twice, yeah.
You haven't felt a single thing? You haven't felt anything sitting there thinking like, what was that? Something just passed by me. Nothing at all.
Nah, I have to say, I wish I did, because
Right.
I feel like that would be quite an awakening and an experience, and I feel like it would be quite cool in a sense, if you can say it would be cool. I don't know.
Don't know.
But I can say I've never felt that. For me, it's like I said, I like doing it because it's part of our culture here, and it's a very big thing, especially in the south of Spain, that we do. And it's cool to be part of something so big and so famous. So that's quite of a selfish side. But it's also a very good time where I'm just by myself in my own thoughts. No one's talking to me for 6, 7 hours. A lot of the time, I feel like when you're in pain is when you think about things in the most like raw and uncut way. So,
Right. And that has what you're describing has a lot to do with religion as well.
yeah, it is. And also, I'm not being serious here, but it's just in case God is real, you know.
Yeah.
Then
You
I'm
got that covered.
Yeah, exactly.
You got that covered.
No, I'm joking, obviously.
Right. So it wasn't religious experience, but it did serve a purpose, which I guess is good. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, definitely.
fair
Definitely. If it didn't serve a purpose for me, I wouldn't do it, because it's there would be no pros if it didn't serve a purpose. You know, it would just be doing it to do it. And
Okay. And how's your experience then, seeing it from the, obviously I was not a practicing Catholic anymore when you were born. But you've seen my family. My family's huge, and they're all still practicing. And maybe not my brother and sister so much, but they still do believe. They still have those core beliefs. Do you see them differently? Is there anything about that frame of mind that sticks to mind, or do you just see them as normal people?
No, on a day-to-day basis, it's quite a normal thing. But I feel like when big things happen, like when your dad died a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
when we were at the funeral, there I could notice the religious side coming out a lot. You know, obviously it's a big thing, and so obviously your dad was very religious, like we said, so he, in that sense, it makes sense. Anyways, but obviously I wasn't at the front with you guys, which I found quite funny. I was with your best friend Fred, but just behind, and I found it quite interesting to, I don't know, just watch your brothers and sisters during this moment. You know.
Yeah. Isn't it funny? I always find it funny how the Catholic death is always seen as something quite sad, even though the theory is that the person that's passed away is
going to a better place.
Is generally considered to have been a good person and is going to a better place. Whether in that case we should all be like laughing and enjoying and rejoicing, and yet everybody's relatively sad, and if it's an unexpected, that's totally sad. And I always find that really funny because it really shows that everybody's in their minds wondering, it's like, are they going to hell or are they going to heaven? We don't really know.
Yeah, but also in that case, I feel like it's also a lot, because at the end of the day, we're human.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Of course. Well,
and
that's it. Yeah.
you're going to miss the person. You won't be able to be with them
Totally.
until you die and you can go to heaven.
Yeah.
So especially if it's one of your parents or one of your brothers and sisters, it's going to be quite a while probably until you can be with them again.
Totally. And I think that's part of the reason why I slowly started steering away from religion.
Right.
The reason was that I found it really hard to reconcile those human feelings, purely human feelings, with the spiritual feelings that I was meant to be having as a Catholic, because very often they contradict each other. You know, you're supposed to be happy when you're sad. You're supposed to hold back when your body's actually asking you to shout out. And very often I thought, well, if this is what's expected of me, why is it expected of me? Why is it so against human nature to, you know? Of course, the answer, my dad's answer, the priest's answer, is that because there's a devil inside of all of us, right? That's dying to come out, you know. And eventually I thought, you know, I don't know, I'm not sure that's totally true, man. You know, I think what we are is what we are, and what we can't deny is that there is goodness inside all of us.
Yeah, of course.
But that has nothing to do with religion. That has to do with your own personal quest to be a good people. You know, we're not born to be bad. You know, it's the elements that make us be bad whenever we do bad things, right? You know, I think I'm incapable of killing anybody ever. But if something happened to you and somebody did something to you in front of me, I know exactly what I would feel. Very anti-Catholic sentiments.
I do have a question. It's kind of, I feel like the answer's going to be quite short, but what was it like actually praying every night, going to church every Sunday?
Okay.
You know, your life actually revolving around religion itself. Because obviously, we've mentioned that I've never done those things. And every time I've been to a church, it's either for someone dying or someone's getting married.
Yeah.
I've actually never been, I don't think I've ever been to an actual sermon. Is it sermon? Service.
Just for the
on a Sunday, I feel like I'm going to go to the church today.
Yeah. It becomes a little bit of a burden.
Right.
At least for me, it always did. You know, it was like, oh, come on. You know, I can't remember ever really waking up in the morning on a Sunday with my parents thinking like, yay, let's go to church. You know, it was always like, you know, okay, let's have breakfast, and, you know, can we not just get it over and done with so I can come back and play football or whatever. Praying is an interesting one because it does help. When you're down in the pits and you truly believe that praying means something and is going to do something, it makes you feel better. And what I always found was that my own prayers were more useful than the standard prayers that you have to learn, you know, like
In what sense?
Well, there's the Catholics are full of prayers, right? So there's a prayer for everything, and they're actually words that you have to learn. You know, the I can't remember now, the Padre Nuestro in Spanish, because I was a Spanish Catholic, so I don't really know the English terms for these words. You know, the Credo and all that, the Hail Mary, all those are prayers that you pray for certain things, and they're standard prayers, they're words. But because they're words and you have to learn them by heart, you repeat them so much, they stop having a meaning. Yeah. It's just a litany of
it's like
of words.
Muscle memory kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So if I found I had to pray for something, I wouldn't sit there and on my knees and go like this and start saying a Hail Mary. I would just ask God directly. That's what I found. Eventually, as I got older and older, I realized that prayer is a form of therapy.
Okay.
But no more.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know why?
Why?
You know how I came to that conclusion? Because nothing ever came true.
Right, okay.
Right? So I grew up with a lot of money until I was 10. Then my parents lost all their money, and my father got obsessed, and from then on, his point in life was trying to regain the glory that he once had. And he tried to do it through prayer. And he brought us children into it through prayer. So guys, pray so that our old glory gets restored. It was meaningless to me because I was quite young when we lost our money. So by the time I was 16, that was just a distant memory. Yeah. So I didn't really know a world with money. So it was like, okay, I'm going to pray for something that I can't really remember. But anyway, let's do it. You're my dad. I believe in you. You're the coolest guy on earth. So let's pray for this. Never happened. I would pray for getting a good GCSE result, right? Never happened. You know, I would pray we were talking about love and relationships last week. I would pray for that beautiful girl to look at me. Never happened. You know what I mean? So the notion that prayer was actually served a purpose and would eventually got lost on me. I very, very quickly came to realize that the only way to have something happen was to make it happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a huge reveal for me, because I spent a lot of years putting a lot of faith, never better said, and a lot of stock in the fact that if I prayed hard enough, stuff would happen.
Yeah.
Which means that that's time wasted for me, because I spent all that time praying and thinking about it, and I lost all that time learning how to make things happen.
Okay, that's quite interesting. And obviously, this is when you were young.
Yeah.
But when you were praying and asking for stuff, did you actually feel a connection to anything or anyone or God or
man.
anything?
Oh, that is such a hard question to answer, because I did feel something. I felt hope
Okay.
mixed with despair,
Right.
right? And I think those are the perfect elements to create a religion, because when you have a person that feels hope at the same time as they feel despair, you, as like, say, if you're a priest and you show them that could mean something, that's when they start following you. But because nothing ever came of the praying, eventually that hope
dwindled
disappeared.
away.
The hope disappeared. The despair stayed.
Yeah. So the good
Right.
the good side basically
Yeah.
went away.
The good side went away. So what I decided to do is stop praying and start doing something about it. You
Yeah.
know? That's what I decided to do. Not much else to say about that, really.
Obviously, I asked it because I've never prayed at night before I went to bed or anything. Like, the only times I haven't really prayed because I don't know the words, so I can't
Yeah.
participate in the prayers. But is what recently I can think of is just before we take out the thrones. They're called thrones in Spanish, but
Yeah.
they're more like
Yeah, the platforms are
Yeah.
images. Images, yeah,
Before we
huge
take out
images,
the image of Christ.
You would pray before.
Yeah, we pray to the image of Christ.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't know the words, so I'm kind of like mouthing and like just trying to go on with it. And the other times are in the funerals.
Yeah.
Or obviously, I don't know, and because I don't know the words, I never actually really felt anything during these prayers. So I was just interested to know if there was actually, which obviously there is.
No.
There are feelings, but you didn't feel any connection to anything or anyone. You didn't feel like
Never.
someone was listening to you at all.
Never really did. Never really did. The only one time I distinctly I remember feeling something was utter disgust and utter rage
Really?
in relation to praying. Not my own praying, but I'll tell you the story. So my mom was ill for quite a while, and eventually
Yeah.
she died. And I remember the night the night she died, they put the velatorio, what they call, where her corpse is lying, so people, especially Catholics, can come over and say their last goodbyes before she gets buried. So, and that was the very night she died. So just a few hours after, I was there. It was night. Where you're feeling what you're feeling, the turmoil of sadness you're feeling, and suddenly my family turns up. So my mom's brothers and sisters turn up. Her older brother is again extreme Catholic, and this guy I would classify as extreme. He's part of the Opus Dei, the organization, the religious organization,
yeah.
Opus Dei. And what he did was gather all his brothers and sisters and anybody else that wanted to join, and urge them to pray a certain litany or a certain amount of prayers with him right there and then. And he finished by saying, if we all do this together and if we do it now, it will forgive our sins for the next year. Right? And I swear, I heard that, and Alfredo had to hold me back because I was going to break his jaw. That's the one time where I felt seriously violent. I was thinking, dude, your sister just died, and you're going to use her death in the name of God to forgive your sins? Is this really what her death means to you? And I thought, never again.
This is a good segue into my next question is,
Right.
Would you say, well, actually I had a question before that, which was, do you still believe in God? But we've already touched that you don't.
No. Let's talk about that, because there's a huge distinction I want to make, and a lot of people listening to this, well, a lot, maybe the one or two that are listening to this are probably fuming with me, thinking like, how dare you? If there's any Catholics listening to this,
Yeah.
they're probably thinking all the counter arguments that you might have for anything that I'm saying.
Right.
But one thing is spirituality and one thing is organized religion. And what I've totally repudiated in my life, and the thing that I'm totally against, and I really am against it, is organized religion. Any
Okay.
type of organized religion, no matter what God they believe in. And the reason for that is because I've come to realize with my own personal experience is that organized religion is merely a form of control,
Okay.
to control the masses that believe in your religion, nothing else. And they're using spirituality as the driving force of that control, which I think is incredibly wrong and incredibly amoral.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I find
No.
that very interesting for you to say, to be
Yeah.
honest.
So
'Cause sorry, just quickly, I just want to, because obviously I know you more or less felt that way, or I know that you didn't really believe in God as such, but we've never actually, like you said before, we never actually talked about this, so
about it.
it's interesting for you to say that.
well, we never. This is a deep conversation. It's not something
Yeah.
that we're going to be talking about. You know, when
Wednesday night.
you're, yeah, especially you're 19 years old now. You're old enough to be able to think about these things without any kind of bias. I never wanted to bias you in any way, which is what happened to me. So that's why we never really spoke about this. Yeah, but yeah, it's something that I felt really strongly about, and I can tell you the very moment where that realization came about. Apart from this incident when my mom died, it's when I visited Rome and the Vatican City.
Okay.
When I walked into St. Paul's Cathedral, and I saw the amount of money, and in fact, there's so much money in there that it's absolutely priceless. The priceless riches that are in that place. The very thought that I could just go up to any column in that church, chisel out one little tiny bit of rock. The money that I could do, I could sell that. And what I could do with that money to help people is something that the Catholic Church isn't even remotely prepared to do.
Right, okay.
And they're holding on to it like crazy, right? And you have the Vatican archives and the Vatican Bank, and at that moment when I saw it, I felt ashamed of being part of that. Because I grew up without any money, but I had a roof under my head. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I went to a private school regardless of that, despite that. And there's a lot of people that don't have access to any of that. And there I am, being in the heart of my religion, the Catholic religion, looking at all that and thinking, we are so stupid, we are so amoral, we are so evil. This is evil, what's happening going. And after that visit, I saw, this isn't for me. And I remember going to my dad to tell him about it, because I was at that time, I must have been, I must have been, in my mid-20s or something like that. So it wasn't like I was 10 or anything like that. And when I spoke to my dad about it, he got really angry at me, and he looked at me like I was possessed with some sort of demon. But he couldn't give me an explanation, and he never could. An explanation that served. And I found that really sad, because my dad was a guy with 2 PhDs. He was an incredibly intelligent man. And I always thought, that's when my opinion of my dad started to change as well.
I was about to ask that.
Because I thought, how can a man like this not see that? How can he actually not only not see it, but defend it? I respect it because I understand the deep meaning that could have for somebody. And that deep meaning could be a lifesaver. Mm-hmm. So I respect it, but I just can't understand it. I really can't. Whew.
Wow.
Man.
Yeah.
It's a weight off my shoulders.
It's very interesting to see that. So you would say that your loss in the faith of the Catholic religion wasn't necessarily you not feeling a connection to God or spirituality. No. It was more the way that the organization, I guess,
carries out its
business, its business and its duties and its or lack of duties, maybe, no?
Yeah.
Lack of helping people
Yeah.
Which obviously, obviously, this isn't to say that no, they don't help anyone. Obviously, there are some churches that do massive things and they
Yeah.
donate a lot of money, but you feel like they could do a lot more.
A lot more, yeah. A lot more. Right. So ultimately what I am, because of my upbringing, what I am is a deeply spiritual person. And I think I always was. I think I would have been that if I hadn't been a Catholic or if my parents hadn't been religious. I feel things, and I feel them way more than the people around me. I've always seen that. So when somebody's sad, I feel that sadness with them, and the only way I can describe that is spirituality. Is it the soul? Is it the spirit? Is it God? I'm not really sure.
Okay.
Is that what you feel too?
Yeah. Here's the weird thing is that I feel like I do feel the same things as you, but I wouldn't call myself a spiritual person.
Right.
You know, I don't have I don't feel any connection or any spiritual connection or any feel like there's any almighty power. You know what I mean? You know, I already said that, but I don't know why I feel this way, like feel these things, feel these emotions. I can tell you the chemical reason why. Well, actually, I can't really, but I
was gonna ask, is like, wow, man.
I'll be able to search it up.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I wish I did feel some spiritual feelings. I did feel like I did have some spirit. I wish I did have a spiritual side, because purely for the curiousness of what it would feel like.
Right.
And also I feel like it's quite a nice thing to have, a sense of being kind of thing.
Right.
You know?
And hearing you say that makes me wonder whether maybe me and Mommy should have given you some sort of spiritual upbringing.
I don't feel like you should. I feel like I don't have it because I don't believe in it in deep down.
Right.
You know what I mean? I feel like if you did grow up, if you did bring me up in a spiritual sense or in a religious way, then I would have that feeling. But because I was brought up that way, not because I truly believed it.
Right. But you
know what I mean?
But you don't sit there thinking like, I'm missing something and I wish my parents would have taught me otherwise.
Not at all. But I do want to learn more about religion.
Yeah.
Not just because I'm curious about it. I want to know. I feel like it's a very interesting topic, and it's a very big and very not controversial, but very polarizing topic. I feel like, especially nowadays.
It is, yeah.
And I feel like it would be good to be more knowledgeable about it, know more about it, and actually be informed about it.
There's a huge amount of history involved in all this, and not just the Bible, but the Quran and any other religious writing that are millennium. There's people who've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
And that is fascinating, and there's no doubt about it. And I really, the one thing I don't want to slate a whole religion in a 45-minute podcast just because I felt like that. I do realize the extent to which these religions are profound, and they do serve their purpose. Don't get me wrong. Of course. They do have their purpose. I deeply respect the people that are alive thanks to these religions. I just don't like the ulterior motive they exist. But they do serve a purpose.
Of course, I mean,
my grandmother, my grandparents, they were fabulous people. My mom was a lovely person. And all their life was devoted to God, and that made them really, really good people. There was not a single bit of, especially my grandmother and my mother, there was not a single bad inkling in their being, and part of it was because of their religion. So I'm not faulting that at all, And I've no doubt that if there is a heaven, they're both sitting there having shots with the old man, because they're the kind of people that deserve it.
Yeah.
Me, I don't know. No matter what I try, I think I'm doomed for eternity.
Yeah. But that's kind of going not off topic, but just changing kind of referencing what you mentioned before about the afterlife and it kind of being a bit of a shame if it just ended.
Yeah.
I don't see it as a shame. I kind of don't see it as a bit freeing of where there's nothing to worry about anymore. You just
Right.
nothing happens.
Do you believe? Obviously, for me, there's no question of if there's an afterlife, it has to be the Catholic afterlife because that's the only one I've ever really learned about.
Yeah.
But of course, there's others. There's Valhalla, which is the one I'd really like to believe in.
Yeah.
Go to heaven and be drinking and fornicating for the rest of eternity, dude.
Yeah, but I think didn't you have to like die fighting for that?
Fighting for that, exactly, which I'm not gonna do.
Yeah.
Anyway, you have Valhalla, you have reincarnation and all that.
Yeah.
Do you feel inclined to believe in any of the others? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be the afterlife where you live happily ever after, in a fluffy little cloud somewhere.
No, I don't think so.
No, not at all. Have you ever met somebody that you think, hang on a minute, have I met you before?
No, that's why. Because here's the thing: is obviously I don't want to say I believe in one because I'm not specific. I'm not knowledgeable in any of them
Right.
to properly give you. But if I had to choose, maybe reincarnation.
That's the one that's most logical to you as a life after
Well,
death?
for me, the most logical is nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
For me, that's the most.
It is the most logical if you think about it.
The most logical and honestly the most freeing.
Yeah.
Because I like the idea of where seeing as there's nothing to worry about, And one thing that it's gonna sound weird, but I've never really enjoyed never liked the idea of living in happiness forever.
Really?
No,
Wow.
because if
That's a good one.
you break down your life and if you think about it, in my mind, it's like playing a video game on the easiest mode you can, right?
Okay.
You're going to enjoy it for the first 10 minutes, but after that, you're going to be like, dude, this is too easy. I'm
There's
just
no
getting
challenge.
bored. There's nothing to do.
Right.
You know
Okay.
what I
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a human mind, isn't it?
And the things that make life enjoyable, if you really break it down, is the hard parts.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not talking about the pain and suffering because that's just not fun for anyone. But
challenges, you mean.
challenges, of course. I just can't imagine being in a super easy life for the rest of eternity.
You know what?
You know?
I've never thought about it like that. That's a great point.
Because
Because it would actually strip you of all humanity. That really is a revelation. Yeah, you're right. If you're a human being and you strive for perfection and this is again going back to the Catholic religion, not to anybody
course.
else's. I can't say what they say. I don't know what their objectives are. But as a Catholic, your job in life is to make sure that you go to heaven. But of course, once you get to heaven,
then?
You're stripped of all humanity. You're stripped of all your essence and all your what actually makes you human. And what makes us humans are the imperfections we have,
Yeah.
and the ability to overcome challenges and to rationalize those challenges. But of course, if there's no need for that to overcome anything, there's no need to overcome your imperfections, and there's no need to rationalize any kind of challenge. You're no longer human. My God, dude, that's crazy. Never thought of it like that ever.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, especially it is true, especially with very devout Catholics, where their whole goal in life is to get to heaven. What then?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Once you reach that pinnacle,
then what do you? I guess you could enjoy being there, being with God.
There's two things that used to drive me crazy, and in fact, one of them used to give me so much vertigo I would actually get dizzy. The first one was, what did God look like? Right? Because you have the concept of the Holy Trinity, right? I don't know if you know what that is. So you have the Son, the Father, and the Holy Spirit. They're the same person, so to speak. They're the same being, and the Father and the Holy Spirit are just ethereal. Mm-hmm. However, the Son, and that's Jesus Christ, is actually in body and soul in heaven, right?
Right.
Him and the Virgin Mary, they're two people that are actually like this, sitting down somewhere or floating around somewhere. And that used to drive me crazy. you know, I think like, well, so that used to bring up images of what heaven looks like and how you know a spirit is like gas, so they're just floating around. Fair enough, but a person, that means that immediately means that heaven is a place,
Yeah.
a physical place. And I'm thinking, where is it in the universe? But the universe is infinite. But of course it's not. If you're a Catholic, you don't believe in the infinity of the universe, right? So then it's somewhere here. And that used to drive me crazy. The second thing that used to drive me crazy, and this is the one that used to make me dizzy, was the idea of infinity, right?
Yeah.
So we live in a finite universe because the Catholics don't believe that it's infinite because God created it and it's a little or a huge bubble. However, once you die, you live or your soul lives forever, infinity, you know? And trying to imagine infinity for a child with a vivid imagination was like trying to go down I sometimes I would feel like I just gone down a sinkhole and I would just be spinning.
I know how you feel.
And I used to lay in bed and sometimes I had to get up sometimes because I just felt so dizzy thinking, you know, and I think that was really the beginning. When I was a child, I think that was really the beginning of the planting of the seed of doubt in my mind. Yeah, so yeah, no, that's a good time to stop. I think
Good place to end.
I think so too. I think maybe not next one because we don't want this to become a religious podcast.
Yeah.
But at some point, I would like to revisit the concept of the theory behind the Bible.
Yeah.
And the Da Vinci Code.
It would be good to,
Illuminati.
because it would be good to come back to that once I actually do read the Bible.
Yeah.
Because I do want to do it sometime this year. I think once I move back, if I can do it, maybe there comes a point where I'm like, oh, dude, it's too much for me. I can't. Or maybe I come back and I'm like, I'm religious now. Forget everything I said in that.
True.
That first
That'd be
podcast.
interesting. That'd be an interesting one.
That would be interesting. See what happens. But yeah, I think that would be a very interesting one. But also because your dad, my granddad, was very, very, especially in his later years, very.
Yeah, he was a complicated person. It'd be interesting to revisit that. Yeah. And I wish. I mean, he was a very camera shy. He would never be in a podcast like this, but I would love to have him around to talk about all this because he's you know, you'd be able to see what I mean.
Yeah, well, I know what you mean because I was there. I wasn't there for all of it because a lot of times it was just you and him when he was, well, him and Fred when he was talking about this stuff. But yeah.
All right. Okay then.
Anyways, thank you. Is there anything else you want to say before we?
No, just if there's anybody watching here that that totally disagrees, please let us know.
Yeah, definitely. If you disagree with us, let us know. Tell us why you disagree and what makes you feel that way, if you can. Because maybe that's a bit too hard, and maybe if you don't want it, then don't do it, obviously.
Of course.
But yeah, just want to end it off again. If you on note saying that if you are religious, we're not telling you to not be religious. If you're not religious, we're not telling you to be religious. Obviously, everyone can do what they want, when they want, and how they want to, as long as they don't hurt other people, of course.
Let's keep it civil, guys.
Yeah. Thank you very much for watching. We hope you enjoy it. I think I definitely enjoyed it, and it was very eye-opening for me to learn more about your childhood and more about what you think about God. I really enjoyed it. But yeah, like I said, thank you very much for watching, guys, and see you next week in a different place because I'm going to be in Ireland then. So it's going to be a bit of a different setup. Well, a very different setup. We're not going to be face-to-face anymore, sadly. But yeah, see you next week, guys. Hope you enjoyed it.